They thought she was gone. They thought she was broken. Grant, a multi-millionaire CEO, and his cruel mistress, Vanessa, walked into that courtroom expecting a victory lap. They were ready to strip his ex-wife, Natalie, of her dignity and leave her with absolutely nothing. But they forgot one thing: a mother's rage is quiet until it destroys you. When those heavy oak doors swung open, Natalie didn't just walk in with a lawyer. She walked in with 2 secret weapons wrapped in blue blankets. And when Judge Sterling finally read the DNA results aloud, the scream Vanessa let out was so piercing, the bailiff had to draw his weapon. You are not ready for the twist in this story. Buckle up. The rain in Seattle that November night wasn't just rain, it was a deluge, the kind that feels like the sky is trying to wash the city off the map. Inside the sprawling, glass-walled mansion on the cliffs of Queen Anne, however, the climate was perfectly controlled. Natalie adjusted the strap of her dress. It was a vintage emerald silk piece, Grant's favorite, or at least it had been his favorite 5 years ago. Tonight was their 10th anniversary. The table was set with the wedding china they hadn't used in 3 years. The roast was resting. The wine, a 2005 Bordeaux, was breathing. But the silence in the house was heavy. It wasn't the comfortable silence of intimacy. It was the suffocating silence of a waiting room. At 8:15 p.m., the front door's biometric lock beeped. Natalie's heart gave a hopeful little jump, a reflex she couldn't quite kill despite the last 2 years of cold shoulders and late nights. She smoothed her hair and walked into the foyer. "Happy anniversary, Grant," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Grant stood in the entryway, shaking off his umbrella. He was 42, handsome in that sharp, predatory way that made him a shark in the boardroom. He looked at Natalie, but his eyes didn't register her as his wife. They registered her as a piece of furniture he had grown tired of. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside. Behind him stood a woman. She was younger, much younger. Maybe 24. She had platinum blonde hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a white trench coat that looked like it cost more than Natalie's first car. This was Vanessa. Natalie knew her face. She was Grant's executive assistant, the one who had been screening Natalie's calls to her own husband for 6 months. "Grant," Natalie whispered, the blood draining from her face. "What is she doing here?" Grant finally looked at her. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the entry table. It slid across the marble surface with a hiss. "I'm done, Natalie," Grant said, his voice flat. "I filed this morning. Incompatibility. Irreconcilable differences. Take your pick, you. You filed for divorce. On our anniversary," Natalie gripped the banister for support. "And you brought her," Vanessa stepped forward, a smirk playing on her lips that was so cruel it felt physical. She looked around the foyer, her eyes assessing the chandelier, the art, the space. "It's a little dated, isn't it, Grant? We'll have to gut the whole first floor." "Stop it," Natalie screamed, a sudden surge of adrenaline breaking through her shock. "Get out of my house," Grant laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "That's the thing, Nat. It's not your house. Never was. The prenup, remember? The one you signed without reading because you were so in love. The house is a premarital asset held in the trust. You have 48 hours to vacate, but honestly, I'd prefer you leave tonight. Vanessa and I have celebrations to attend to. Tonight," Natalie gasped. "It's pouring rain. I have nowhere to go. My family is across the country. Grant, please. We've been together a decade too long," Vanessa chimed in, walking past Natalie to run a finger along the dining table. "Look at you. You're tired, Natalie. You're old news. Grant needs a partner who matches his trajectory. Not a housewife." Grant checked his watch. "I've transferred $5,000 to your personal account. That's enough for a motel and a plane ticket to wherever you came from. Consider it a severance package." "Severance?" Natalie felt the room spinning. "I'm your wife, not your employee. Functionally, there's no difference," Grant said coldly. "And you've been underperforming," he signaled to the door. "Go pack a bag. The essentials only. Security will clear out the rest of your junk next week and ship it to storage." Natalie looked at him, really looked at him, and realized the man she had loved was dead. Or maybe he never existed. She looked at Vanessa, who was already pouring herself a glass of the wine Natalie had opened for the anniversary toast. Natalie didn't scream. She didn't fight. A terrifying calm washed over her. She walked upstairs, packed a single suitcase with her clothes, her grandmother's locket, and her passport. She didn't take the jewelry Grant had bought her. She didn't take the cards. As she walked back down the stairs, Grant was already sitting on the couch, Vanessa on his lap. They didn't even look up as she opened the heavy front door and stepped out into the freezing Seattle rain. She walked to her 10-year-old sedan, the only car in the driveway not leased in the company name, and turned the key. As she backed out, she saw the warm glow of the living room, the life she had built, now occupied by a stranger. She drove for 3 hours until the tears blurred her vision so badly she had to pull over at a truck stop off I-5. She curled up in the back seat, shivering, and cried until she passed out. She had no idea that inside her body, a biological time bomb was ticking. 3 months later, life at the bottom was expensive. Natalie learned that quickly. The $5,000 Grant had given her had evaporated in 6 weeks, eaten up by cheap motel rooms, car repairs, and food. She was now living in a basement studio apartment in a rough part of Tacoma, miles away from the gleaming towers of Seattle. The walls were thin, smelling of damp drywall and other people's cooking. She had taken a job as a night shift janitor at a corporate office park, ironically not far from Grant's competitors. She scrubbed toilets and emptied trash cans from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was grueling work, especially because she had been feeling constantly sick. She chalked it up to stress, to the poor diet of ramen and bread, to the depression that clung to her like a wet blanket. But the sickness didn't stop. It got worse. One morning, after a shift, she fainted in the hallway of her apartment building. Her neighbor, a gritty but kind elderly woman named Mrs. Higgins, found her and called 911. Natalie woke up in the county hospital ER. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A young doctor with tired eyes was looking at a clipboard. "Mrs. Miller," the doctor asked, using her maiden name. "Yes," Natalie croaked. "Did I have a heart attack?" "Is it stress?" The doctor shook his head, a small smile appearing. "No, Natalie. You're severely dehydrated and anemic, which is common in your condition. You're pregnant," he said. The room went silent. Natalie stared at the ceiling tiles. "That's impossible. Grant and I. We barely touched in the last year. There was only the trip to Cabo 4 months ago. One night, well," the doctor flipped a page. "That one night was very productive. The ultrasound shows 2 heartbeats. You're having twins. The world tilted. She was divorced, or soon to be, homeless essentially, making minimum wage, and carrying the heirs to one of the biggest fortunes in the state. Panic set in first. If Grant found out, he would take them. He had the best lawyers in the city. He would paint her as unstable, poor, unfit. He would give the babies to Vanessa to raise as accessories. The thought made Natalie physically ill. "He cannot know," she told herself. "Not yet." She left the hospital with a prescription for prenatal vitamins she couldn't afford and a fire in her belly that replaced the despair. She wasn't fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for them. She needed help. Real help. She went to the public library and used the free computer. She searched for legal aid, but the waiting lists were months long. She sat there, head in hands, until she remembered a name. Lucas Bennett. Lucas had been Grant's fraternity brother in college, but they had fallen out years ago. Lucas despised Grant's ruthless business tactics. Lucas had gone into family law, working for a boutique firm that specialized in high-conflict cases. He was known as a bulldog. Natalie found his email. She typed quickly, her fingers trembling. Subject: Grant's wife. "I need help. I have a secret that can destroy him." She didn't expect a reply. But 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "Meet me at the Grind coffee shop on 4th. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't bring your phone. Buy a burner." The meeting was intense. Lucas listened as Natalie poured out the story, the eviction, the poverty, the twins. When she mentioned the twins, Lucas's eyes widened. "Does he know?" Lucas asked, leaning in. "No, and he can't know. Not until I have leverage." Lucas sat back, tenting his fingers. Grant is moving fast. He's pushing for a summary judgment next week. He claims you abandoned the marital home. He's hiding assets, Natalie. I know he is. He's been moving money offshore for years. If we can prove financial fraud, we can pierce the prenup. But we need time. I don't have time, Natalie said, touching her stomach. I'm showing. I can hide it under baggy clothes for maybe another month, but eventually. Lucas smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. The hearing is set for June. That's 5 months from now. He thinks you'll be a no-show because you can't afford a lawyer. He thinks he'll get a default judgment. So what do? We let him think that, Lucas said. You stay hidden. You disappear completely. I'll file a notice of appearance at the very last second. We ambush him at the final hearing. And you. He looked at her stomach. You bring the twins. By June they'll be born. Due date is late May, Natalie calculated. Perfect, Lucas nodded. We let him think he's won. We let Vanessa think she's the queen. And then we drop the bomb. But Natalie, you have to be strong. You have to live in the shadows for 5 more months. I'll do whatever it takes, she vowed. And she did. She moved to a shelter for women to save money. She ate every vegetable she could get her hands on. She read legal books at night. And she grew. Her belly swelled, heavy with 2 boys. Grant, meanwhile, was living the high life. The tabloids were full of pictures of him and Vanessa in Paris, Milan, Aspen. Vanessa was sporting a massive diamond ring. They were planning a wedding for July, assuming the divorce was finalized in June. Grant had no idea that in a tiny room in a shelter, his ex-wife was knitting blue booties and plotting his destruction. June 12th. The day of the hearing. The sun was shining brightly over Seattle, a stark contrast to the rain on the night Natalie was kicked out. Grant adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of his Maybach. You look tense, darling, Vanessa purred from the seat next to him. She was wearing a white suit, clearly intended to look bridal. Just want this over with, Grant muttered. My lawyers haven't heard a peep from her in 6 months. No counter-filings, no demands. She's probably in a trailer park in Idaho by now. Pathetic, Vanessa laughed, checking her makeup. Well, today we popped the champagne. The judge is sterling. He's old school. He hates time wasters. Since she won't show up, he'll sign the decree by noon. They arrived at the courthouse. The paparazzi were there. Grant had tipped them off. He wanted the world to see him moving on legally. He smiled, waved, and guided Vanessa up the steps. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was sterile. Judge Arthur Sterling sat on the bench, looking over his glasses. He was a man known for zero tolerance for nonsense. Grant's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Thorne, stood up. Your Honor, the respondent, Natalie Miller, has failed to respond to any summons. We ask for a default judgment in favor of my client, granting full retention of all assets as per the prenuptial agreement. Judge Sterling looked at the empty table on the left. Is there no representation for Mrs. Miller? None, Your Honor, Thorne smirked. It appears she has accepted the terms. Very well, Judge Sterling opened the file. I see no reason to delay. The prenup is clear. Objection. The doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open, they banged against the walls. Every head turned. Grant spun around in his chair, annoyance flashing across his face. Lucas Bennett walked in, carrying a heavy briefcase. He looked immaculate in a navy suit. Lucas, Grant whispered, confused. What the hell is he doing here? Your Honor, Lucas boomed, his voice filling the room. Lucas Bennett, entering appearance for the respondent, Natalie Miller. We apologize for the delay. My client had some childcare issues to attend to. Childcare, Vanessa whispered loudly. She doesn't have kids. She's barren. That was half the problem, Mr. Bennett, Judge Sterling frowned. You are very late. This is highly irregular. Where is your client? She is right here, Your Honor. Lucas stepped aside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sound of wheels. Natalie walked into the courtroom. She looked different. The fear was gone from her eyes. She wore a simple, elegant black dress that fit her postpartum body perfectly. Her hair was pulled back. She looked radiant. But no one was looking at her face. They were looking at the double stroller she was pushing. Grant's jaw literally dropped. He stood up, forgetting where he was. What? What is this? Natalie pushed the stroller right up to the defense table. She engaged the brakes with a loud click. She reached down and pulled back the canopy. Two tiny infants, barely 3 weeks old, were sleeping soundly. They had dark hair. They had Grant's nose. They had Grant's chin. There was no denying it. They were miniature carbon copies of the CEO, standing 10 feet away. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Order, Judge Sterling banged. His gavel. Order in this court. Vanessa stood up, her face twisting into a mask of fury. What is this stunt? Whose brats are those? She borrowed them. She's trying to get sympathy money. Natalie looked at Vanessa, calm as a frozen lake. They aren't brats, Vanessa. They are Grant's sons. Leo and Sam. Grant stumbled back, knocking his chair over. That's impossible. You. We. The timing. The night in Cabo, Natalie said clearly. You remember, don't you? Or was that just another transaction to you? Your Honor, Thorne, Grant's lawyer, was sweating. This is ambuscade. We had no notice of any children because my client feared for their safety, Lucas interjected smoothly. Given Mr. Grant's threats to leave her destitute and his known attempts to hide assets, we kept the pregnancy hidden to protect the heirs. Heirs, Vanessa shrieked. There are no heirs. The prenup says she gets nothing. Actually, Lucas pulled a document from his briefcase. The prenup has a change of circumstances clause regarding issue of the marriage. Specifically, Section 8, Paragraph C, if children are born of the marriage, the trust holding the marital home and 40% of liquid assets immediately vests in the children, with the primary custodial parent named as trustee. The silence that followed was deafening. Grant turned pale. He knew that clause. He had put it in there 10 years ago to appease his father, never thinking he'd actually have kids with Natalie. That means, Lucas smiled, Natalie doesn't just get alimony. She controls the house. And she controls 40% of your company, you lying witch, Vanessa lunged. She actually lunged across the aisle. The bailiff stepped forward, blocking her. Those aren't his. I want a DNA test. Right now, we anticipated that, Lucas said, pulling out a sealed envelope. But we are happy to have the court order a new one. However, while we are discussing DNA, Lucas turned to look at the judge and then at Vanessa. The look in his eyes changed from professional to predatory. We also have some evidence regarding another paternity matter, Your Honor. If Ms. Vanessa wants to discuss DNA, we should probably discuss the baby she claims to be carrying. Vanessa froze. Her hand went instinctively to her own stomach, which was just barely showing a bump she had told Grant was his. Grant looked at Vanessa. What is he talking about? Nothing, Vanessa screamed too quickly. He's lying. Make them stop, Grant. Judge Sterling leaned forward. He loved a good twist. Mr. Bennett, proceed. What evidence? Lucas held up a USB drive. Your Honor, my investigator has been very busy. While Mr. Grant was in Paris with his mistress, she was taking private trips to visit a personal trainer in Miami. We have logs. We have texts. And we have a prenatal genetic screening result that Ms. Vanessa tried to delete from the cloud. No, Vanessa screamed. Grant, Lucas said, looking directly at his old fraternity brother. You're sterile. Or you were supposed to be. You had a vasectomy scheduled for next month, didn't you? But Natalie got pregnant before you started shooting blanks. Vanessa, however, got pregnant while you were out of town. Grant looked at Vanessa. The blood rushed to his face, turning it a deep shade of crimson. Vanessa, is it true? Don't listen to him, she wailed. Judge, Lucas said. We request an immediate paternity test for the twins to prove their claim to the estate. And we request a subpoena for Ms. Vanessa's medical records. Granted, Judge Sterling said, the ghost of a smile on his face. But the drama wasn't over. As the bailiff moved to hand Grant the paperwork, Grant's phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then a notification popped up on the screens of half the reporters in the room. Lucas checked his watch. God. And that would be the SEC. The what? Grant whispered. The financial fraud, Grant, Lucas said softly. You moved the money to hide it from Natalie. But you moved it illegally. We tipped them off this morning. The back doors of the courtroom opened again. This time it wasn't a mother with a stroller. It was two federal agents in windbreakers. The silence in courtroom 4B shattered like glass. The two federal agents, men in nondescript windbreakers that somehow screamed authority, marched down the center aisle. They didn't look at the judge. They didn't look at the cameras. Their eyes were locked on Grant. Grant Miller, the lead agent, barked. He was a man with a buzz cut and a scar running through his left eyebrow. "I'm Special Agent Davis with the Securities and Exchange Commission, accompanied by the FBI Financial Crimes Division." Grant stood frozen, his hand still hovering near his phone. He looked like a man waking up from a dream to find his house on fire. This is a divorce hearing. You can't be here." "Thorne, do something." Mr. Thorne, Grant's slick divorce lawyer, was already packing his briefcase with frantic speed. "I handle domestic disputes, Grant. I don't handle federal indictments for wire fraud and money laundering." "You're on your own." "Fraud," Grant sputtered, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax figure. "I didn't. I just moved some assets for tax purposes." "You moved $40 million into shell companies in the Cayman Islands to conceal them from a court-ordered asset division," Agent Davis said, his voice loud enough for the back row of reporters to hear. "And you did it by falsifying corporate earnings reports to crash your own stock price temporarily, allowing you to buy back shares at a fraction of the value. That's insider trading, market manipulation, and wire fraud." The agent pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal caught the light of the courtroom chandeliers. "Grant Miller, you are under arrest." "No," Vanessa shrieked. She threw herself at Grant, grabbing his lapels. "Not out of love," Natalie realized as she watched from the defense table, but out of desperation. "Grant, the accounts. You have to transfer the signature authority to me before you go. You promised." "The baby needs security." Grant looked down at Vanessa, his eyes wide and unseeing. He was in shock. He didn't even hear her. He allowed the agents to spin him around. Click. Click. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting tight was the loudest sound in the world. It was the sound of an empire falling. "Get off him, ma'am," the second agent warned Vanessa, peeling her fingers off Grant's suit. "But I'm his fiancée," Vanessa wailed, turning to the cameras, playing the victim. "They're framing him." "This is a conspiracy." "It's not a conspiracy, Ms. Vanessa," Lucas Bennett said, his voice cutting through the noise. He was standing calmly beside Natalie, his hand resting protectively on the handle of the twin stroller. "It's a paper trail. And you're on it too," Vanessa froze. "What? We have the emails," Lucas said, holding up a flash drive. "You helped him set up the shell companies. You signed as the registered agent for Vane Enterprises in Panama. Did you think we wouldn't look?" Vanessa's face went from panic to terror. She took a step back, looking for an exit, but the bailiff blocked the aisle. Judge Sterling banged his gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Enough. This court is now in session, and I will have order. Agents, take Mr. Miller into custody, but do not remove him from the building until I have issued a ruling on the minors." The agents paused, holding Grant by the arms. Grant looked pathetic now, his shoulders slumped, his arrogance stripped away. He looked across the room at Natalie. Natalie stood up. She walked around the table, the stroller moving with her. She stopped 5 feet from Grant. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked powerful. "I told you, Grant," she said softly. "I told you that you couldn't just throw people away like trash. You forgot that I was the one who did the books when you started the company in our garage. You forgot that I know how you think, Nat." Grant croaked. "Help me. Please. I can fix this. We can. We can talk. There's nothing to talk about," Natalie said. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, given the arrest of the petitioner and the freezing of his assets by the federal government, I move for immediate emergency custody of the children and sole possession of the marital residence, as per the change of circumstances clause in the prenup. The children need a home today. Not a motel," Judge Sterling nodded. He looked at Grant with disdain. "Mr. Miller, you are remanded to federal custody. Bail will be set by a federal magistrate. In the interim, this court finds that you are a flight risk and, frankly, a moral hazard." The judge signed a document furiously. "The prenuptial agreement is hereby enforced under Section 8. The marital home in Queen Anne is immediately transferred to the Miller Family Trust, with Natalie Miller as the sole trustee. All liquid assets remaining in the United States, if there are any left, are frozen pending the outcome of the fraud investigation, with a monthly stipend released to Mrs. Miller for child support." He looked at Vanessa. "And as for you, young lady, I suggest you get a lawyer. A good one. Because if you helped him hide that money, you're an accessory." "I didn't know," Vanessa cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her mascara. "He made me sign things. I'm pregnant." "You can't arrest a pregnant woman. We'll see about that pregnancy," Lucas muttered. "Court is adjourned." Judge Sterling banged the gavel. The scene that followed was pure chaos. Grant was hauled away, head hung low, as reporters shouted questions. "Grant, did you steal the money, Grant? Is it true about the mistress?" Vanessa tried to follow him, but Thorne, the lawyer, stopped her. "I'm resigning as counsel," he told her coldly. "My retainer is empty, and my client is a felon. Don't call me." He walked out, leaving Vanessa standing alone in the middle of the courtroom. She looked around, wild-eyed. Her eyes landed on Natalie. Natalie was tucking a blanket around one of the twins, Leo, who had started to fuss. She looked up and met Vanessa's gaze. "You have 2 hours to get your things out of my house," Natalie said. "Security will be there to escort you. Anything left after 2 hours goes to the curb." "You can't do that," Vanessa hissed, though her voice shook. "I live there, not anymore," Natalie said. She turned to Lucas. "Let's go home." Lucas smiled and took the handle of the stroller. They walked out of the courtroom, head held high, through a parting sea of stunned reporters. As they exited the courthouse into the bright Seattle sun, Natalie took a deep breath. The air smelled different. It smelled like freedom. But she knew it wasn't over. Grant was down, but Vanessa was a cornered rat. And cornered rats bite. 3 days later, the Queen Anne mansion was quiet. The rain had returned, washing the windows in gentle waves, but inside it was warm. Natalie sat in the nursery. It used to be Grant's home office, the war room where he planned his takeovers. Now the dark mahogany desk was gone, replaced by 2 white cribs. The smell of expensive cigars and ambition had been scrubbed away, replaced by the scent of baby powder and lavender. She was exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion. The twins, Leo and Sam, were finally sleeping. Downstairs, the house was buzzing with activity, but not the kind Grant liked. Lucas was in the living room with a forensic accountant and a private investigator named Andrew. They were sifting through boxes of documents that Vanessa had failed to shred before being escorted out by the private security team Natalie had hired. Natalie walked down the grand staircase. She felt a strange sense of ownership she had never felt when she was married to Grant. Back then, she was a guest in his museum. Now she was the curator. "Find anything?" Natalie asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Lucas looked up, his tie loosened. He looked tired but exhilarated. "It's worse than we thought, Nat. Grant wasn't just hiding money from you. He was hiding it from everyone. Investors, the IRS, his partners. But here's the kicker. He was sloppy. And he was sloppy because he was distracted. Distracted by Vanessa, Natalie said. Exactly, Andrew, the investigator, chimed in. She was a sharp woman with glasses and a no-nonsense bun. But Vanessa wasn't just a distraction. She was a drain. We found transfers. Huge ones. From Grant's personal accounts to an LLC called V-Style Consultants. Guess who owns it? Vanessa, Natalie guessed. And guess where the money went? Andrew slid a paper across the table. It didn't go to investments. It went to a man named Rico Morty in Miami. Rico, Natalie frowned. Who is Rico? He's a personal trainer, Andrew said, a dry smile touching her lips. And an aspiring model. And according to his Instagram, he's been in a long-distance relationship with a wealthy benefactor for the last year. Natalie's eyes widened. She was funding her boyfriend with Grant's money. It gets better, Lucas said. He picked up a sealed medical envelope. The court-ordered DNA results for the twins came back an hour ago. And the results for the prenatal test on Vanessa's baby arrived too. Natalie's heart hammered. And Leo and Sam, Lucas tapped the first paper, a 99.999% Grant S. No surprise there. They have his nose, and Vanessa's baby, Lucas handed her the second paper. Incompatible, Natalie stared at the document. Grant isn't the father. Nope, Lucas said. We ran a cross-check against public databases because we're thorough like that. It's Rico. The trainer in Miami. Natalie sat down heavily on the sofa. Oh my God. Does Grant know? Not yet, Lucas said. He's sitting in a federal detention center downtown. He's been denied bail because the judge thinks he has assets hidden abroad to help him flee. He's in a 6x8 cell, probably thinking Vanessa is out here fighting for him. She's not fighting for him, Andrew noted. She's fighting for the safe. The safe, Natalie asked. There's a wall safe in the master bedroom closet, Andrew said. We haven't been able to crack it yet. But Vanessa has been calling Grant's old lawyer, Thorne, begging for the combination. She says her passport is in there. We think it's diamonds. Or cash, Natalie stood up. She remembered the safe. Grant used to keep his emergency fund there. A stash of bearer bonds and loose diamonds, insurance against a rainy day. I know the combination, Natalie said. Lucas looked at her. You do, it's his birthday. Backwards. He's a narcissist, remember, they all ran upstairs. The master bedroom was a wreck. Vanessa had trashed it before leaving. Clothes were slashed, perfume bottles smashed against the wall. It was a petty, violent tantrum frozen in time. Natalie walked into the massive walk-in closet. She moved a painting of a ship aside to reveal the steel safe. She took a breath and spun the dial. 210581. Click. The heavy door swung open. It wasn't empty. But it didn't contain diamonds. It contained a stack of journals, and a single velvet box, and a flash drive taped to a folder labeled leverage. Natalie opened the velvet box. It was her grandmother's ring, the one she thought she had lost 2 years ago. Grant had stolen it. Why? To gaslight her. To make her think she was going crazy. She picked up the folder labeled leverage. She opened it. Inside were photos. Photos of Vanessa. But not flattering ones. These were photos of Vanessa meeting with a man in a parking garage. A man in a suit. That's Grant's competitor, Lucas said, looking over her shoulder. That's Simon Vance, the CEO of Horizon Tech. Why would Grant have photos of his mistress meeting his competitor? Natalie asked. Because, Lucas realized, his voice dropping to a whisper. Grant knew. Or he suspected. Vanessa wasn't just cheating on him with a trainer. She was a corporate spy. She was feeding inside information to Horizon Tech. That's why Grant's stock was tanking. It wasn't just him manipulating it. Someone was leaking his product roadmaps. He was gathering evidence, Natalie realized. He was going to blackmail her. Or destroy her, but she destroyed him first, Lucas said. Suddenly, the front door alarm chimed. Motion detected, the automated voice announced. Entryway, we changed the codes, Natalie whispered. Who could get in? Lucas grabbed a heavy brass statue from the dresser. Stay here, they heard footsteps running up the stairs. Frantic, clicking heels. Vanessa appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. She looked deranged. Her blonde bob was matted, her expensive clothes stained. She was holding a crowbar. She froze when she saw Natalie, Lucas, and Andrew standing by the open safe. "You," Vanessa screamed. "Get away from it." "That's mine, Vanessa," Lucas said, stepping forward. "Put the crowbar down. The police are on their way. I need that drive." Vanessa pointed at the folder in Natalie's hand. "Give it to me." "He promised me if I got the drive, he'd pay me the rest." "Who?" Natalie asked, stepping forward, clutching the folder. "Simon Vance." "Your handler." Vanessa's face went white. "How?" "How do you know?" "We know everything, Vanessa," Natalie said, her voice shaking with rage. "We know about Rico. We know the baby isn't Grant's. And we know you were selling Grant out to his competitors. He deserved it," Vanessa spat. "He treated me like a doll." "Where this, Vanessa?" "Don't talk, Vanessa. He's a monster." "I was going to take his money and run to Miami with Rico." "I earned it." "You earned a prison sentence," Andrew said, holding up her phone. "I've been recording this whole time." Vanessa lunged. She raised the crowbar, aiming for Natalie. But she forgot one thing. Natalie wasn't the weak, submissive wife anymore. She was a mother protecting her nest. As Vanessa swung, Natalie sidestepped and shoved her. Hard. Vanessa stumbled back, tripping over a pile of the clothes she had slashed days earlier. She fell backward, hitting her head on the island dresser. She slumped to the floor, dazed but conscious, dropping the crowbar. Lucas kicked the weapon away. "Nice move, Nat." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. "I want to see him," Natalie said, looking down at the sobbing Mistress. "I want to see Grant. He's in federal lockup," Lucas said. "Arrangements can be made," Andrew said, checking her phone. "I used to be a Fed. I can get you a visitation pass." "Why?" Lucas asked. "Why bother with him?" "Because," Natalie said, closing the safe. "I want him to know exactly who he threw away. And I want to be the one to tell him that his perfect life was a lie from start to finish. I want to watch the hope leave his eyes." Lucas looked at her. It was a cold, hard desire for vengeance, but after everything she had been through, the poverty, the hunger, the fear for her twins, it was justified. "Okay," Lucas said. "Let's go to jail." The federal detention center in downtown Seattle was a world away from the penthouse suites and boardrooms Grant Miller was used to. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. The lighting was a harsh, unforgiving fluorescent buzz that made everyone look sick. Natalie sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor. Between her and the door was a thick pane of reinforced plexiglass. She had left the twins with her mother, who had flown in the moment the news broke. This was not a place for children. The heavy steel door on the other side buzzed. Grant shuffled in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His hair, usually styled to perfection with $50 gel, was greasy and flat. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. He looked 20 years older than he had in the courtroom. He sat down, picking up the black phone receiver. His hands were shaking. Natalie picked up her phone. "Hello, Grant." "Nat," his voice was crackly through the receiver, desperate. Nat, thank God. You came. I knew you'd come. You're the only one who ever actually cared. Natalie didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just watched him like a scientist observing a specimen. I came to answer a question you asked in court. Question, Grant blinked, confused. Nat, listen to me. Thorne abandoned me. The accounts are frozen. I need a lawyer. A federal defense attorney. I need you to liquidate some of the assets in the trust. The trust belongs to Leo and Sam. Natalie cut him off, her voice ice cold. I'm not touching a penny of their future to pay for your mistakes. Mistakes. It was business. Everyone does it. Grant leaned forward, his breath fogging the glass. Look, I can fix this. If I get out, I can turn the company around. We can be a family. I saw the twins. They look like me. We can start over. Start over. Natalie let out a short, incredulous laugh. Grant, you tried to leave me homeless. You tried to erase me. There is no we. There is only me and the children you didn't want. Grant slumped. It was Vanessa. She got in my head. She made me think you were holding me back. She wanted the lifestyle, Nat. I was weak. I admit it. But she loves me. She's carrying my child. I have to think about that baby too. Natalie reached into her purse. She pulled out the photo of Vanessa and the man in the parking garage. She pressed it against the glass. Grant squinted. Who is that? That's Simon Vance. My competitor. Why is he with Vanessa? Because she works for him, Grant, Natalie said, delivering the first blow. She didn't love you. She was a corporate spy. She's been leaking your R&D to Horizon Tech for 2 years. That's why you lost the government contract last fall. That's why your stock dipped, forcing you to hide money offshore. She engineered your failure. Grant's face went slack. No, that's impossible. She hates Simon. She hates everyone who isn't paying her, Natalie said. She pulled out the second document, the DNA test results for Vanessa's baby. And as for the heir you're so worried about. She held the paper up. Grant read the bold text, paternity excluded. What does that mean? He whispered, his voice trembling. It means you're not the father, Grant. The father is a 25-year-old personal trainer in Miami named Rico. Vanessa has been funding his modeling career with the money she stole from you. Grant dropped the phone. It swung on its metal cord, banging against the wall. He stared at the table, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The guard stepped forward. Pick up the phone, inmate. Grant fumbled for it, putting it back to his ear. Tears were streaming down his face now. Not the crocodile tears he used in negotiations, but real, ugly tears of total defeat. Oh, she played me, Grant sobbed. I gave her everything. I bought her a villa in Tuscany. I gave her the codes to the accounts. I divorced you for her. Yes, Natalie said simply. You did. I have nothing, Grant wept. I have no money, no company, no wife, no girlfriend. You have 2 sons, Natalie said, her voice softening just a fraction, but only with pity, not love. Leo and Sam. They are wonderful, Grant. They are smart and kind. And one day, when they are old enough to understand, I will tell them who their father was. Was, Grant asked. Yes. Was, Natalie said. Because the man in this cage. The man who stole and lied and cheated. That's not a father. That's a cautionary tale. Nat, please, Grant begged, placing his hand on the glass. Don't leave me in here. I'll die in here. I'm not built for this. You built this yourself, brick by brick, Natalie said. She stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She looked down at him one last time. Goodbye, Grant. I won't be visiting again, Natalie. Natalie, Grant screamed, slamming his fist against the glass. The guard moved in, grabbing Grant's shoulder. Natalie turned around and walked toward the heavy steel door. She didn't look back. She heard Grant's screams fade as the door hissed shut behind her. She walked out into the lobby where Lucas was waiting. He stood up, looking concerned. You okay? He asked. Natalie took a deep breath. She felt lighter than air. The ghost that had been haunting her, the fear of Grant, the need for his validation, was gone. I'm better than okay, she said, taking Lucas's arm. I'm free. 1 year later, the Seattle skyline shimmered beneath a pale autumn sun, glass towers catching light like polished steel. But one detail had changed. Where bold silver letters once spelled Miller Tower, the name now gleamed in understated brass, L&S Foundation. Natalie stood in what had once been Grant's corner office. A year ago, the room had been a shrine to intimidation. Black leather furniture, sharp lines, cold marble, and a desk positioned like a throne. Now it felt different. The walls were softened with modern art in warm tones. Cream-colored sofas replaced the rigid chairs. A low bookshelf displayed framed photos of 2 round-cheeked 1-year-old boys mid-laughter, their smiles wide and fearless. The legal war had ended months ago. Grant had pleaded guilty to wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The empire he once wielded like a weapon collapsed under federal scrutiny. 12 years in a federal penitentiary. No press conference. No swagger. Just a quiet sentencing and the metallic click of handcuffs. What remained of his assets, after penalties and restitution, had been sealed into a blind trust for the twins. Vanessa's fall had been faster and lonelier. Corporate espionage. Grand larceny. Breaking and entering. 5 years. The headlines that once fawned over her style now printed mugshots. Natalie had heard, through attorneys and whispers, that Vanessa had given birth to a daughter while incarcerated. The child was being raised by Vanessa's estranged mother in Ohio. Rico, the trainer who had once hovered around the mansion, disappeared as soon as the money evaporated. Storms clear out more than clouds. Natalie turned from the window and walked across the office, her heels softer now against the refinished wood floors. She was no longer the woman who had stood in a courtroom fighting to prove her children's legitimacy and her own sanity. She wasn't a discarded wife living off a settlement. She had rebuilt. Grant's legitimate holdings, those not tainted by fraud, had been modest but salvageable. Instead of continuing the aggressive acquisitions that had once crushed competitors, Natalie pivoted the company entirely. L&S Foundation was now a philanthropic venture capital firm. They funded women-owned startups, sustainable technology, community infrastructure projects that turned forgotten neighborhoods into thriving ones. Profit still mattered, but so did purpose. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Natalie called. Lucas entered with 2 coffees and a slim folder tucked beneath his arm. He no longer wore the guarded expression of a courtroom strategist. Today he looked relaxed, navy suit jacket rolled at the sleeves, tie loosened slightly. "The board approved the new scholarship initiative," he said, handing her a cup. "Full ride for first-generation college students in tech." "Unanimous," Natalie smiled, accepting the coffee. "Unanimous. I must be losing my edge. They love the direction you're taking this place," Lucas replied. "Turns out ethics are good for business. They love that we are profitable without breaking federal law," she corrected lightly. He laughed, stepping closer. A year ago, he had been her attorney, calm, meticulous, relentless in court. Somewhere between depositions and board restructuring meetings, something steadier had grown between them. "You did the hard part," Lucas said quietly. "You stood up when it would have been easier to disappear. You made sure I wasn't standing alone," she answered. For a moment, the city hummed below them, distant and unthreatening. Her phone buzzed against the desk. Natalie glanced at the screen and smiled. The nanny had sent a video. She tapped it open. Leo and Sam were seated on a picnic blanket at the park, surrounded by bright balloons tied to a stroller. A small blue frosted cake sat between them, though sat might have been generous. Both boys had plunged their hands into it, faces smeared with icing, giggling with wild delight. Leo tried to feed Sam a fistful of cake. Sam retaliated by patting frosting into his brother's hair. It was chaos. It was perfect. "They look happy," Lucas said, leaning over her shoulder. "They are," Natalie replied softly. She watched her sons shriek with laughter, unconcerned about cameras or headlines or board meetings. They didn't remember courtrooms. They didn't remember rain. And they never would. "They're safe," she continued. "They're loved. And they'll never have to wonder if home can disappear overnight." Lucas wrapped an arm around her waist. "You've given them more than security," he said. "You've given them an example." Natalie set the phone down and looked once more at the skyline. The tower across the city no longer carried a man's surname like a warning. It carried her children's initials. L and S, not a monument to ego. A promise. The rain that had once marked the worst night of her life felt distant now, like weather from another climate entirely. Storms had come. Storms had stripped away illusions, money, reputation. But they had also revealed what remained when everything false collapsed. Strength, family, a future she chose. Ready for the ribbon cutting this afternoon? Lucas asked. Natalie picked up her coat, smoothing it over her shoulders. More than ready, she said. And this time, when she walked toward the door, she wasn't walking into a battle. She was walking into the life she had built. You know, Lucas said thoughtfully. Grant sent a letter from prison. It arrived at the firm this morning. Natalie stiffened slightly. What does it say? He wants to know if you're happy, Lucas said. He says he has a lot of time to think. He says he realizes now that the anniversary night, the night he kicked you out, was the biggest mistake of his life. Natalie looked at the phone, at the smiling faces of her sons. She thought about the cold rain that night. She thought about the fear. She thought about the woman she used to be, scared, dependent, silent. And then she looked at the woman reflected in the glass of the high-rise window. Strong, independent, a mother, a CEO. It wasn't a mistake, Natalie said softly. What? Lucas asked, surprised. It wasn't a mistake, she repeated, turning to look at him with clear, bright eyes. It was a gift. If he hadn't kicked me out, I never would have found my strength. I never would have found you. I never would have built this. She picked up the file Lucas had brought in and tossed it onto the desk, right next to the picture of the twins. Burn the letter, Lucas, she said. We don't look back. We only look forward. Lucas smiled, picked up the coffee and toasted her. To moving forward, to us, Natalie said. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the city in gold. The storm was over. The reign of the poor wife was finished. The reign of Natalie Miller had just begun. Wow. Just. Wow. Talk about karma serving a cold dish right. Natalie went from being homeless in the rain to owning the very tower her ex-husband built, while Grant and his scheming mistress ended up behind bars. It's a powerful reminder that the truth always comes out, and sometimes the people you step on are the ones who end up holding the keys to your cell. I want to know what you think. If you were Natalie, would you have visited Grant in prison, or would you have just let him rot without saying goodbye? And do you think Vanessa deserved a harsher sentence? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story, please smash that like button, share this with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe to the channel for more true-to-life stories of betrayal and redemption. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.